She told me to apologize for ruining her family dinner while sleeping with her boss. I smiled, packed my bags, and started writing her social obituary. 8 hours in a car that seemed to shrink with each passing mile, and finally we reached the Ellington estate. I loosened my grip on the steering wheel, flexing fingers that had gone stiff, while Sabrina touched up her lipstick in the passenger mirror. The coastal Gothic monstrosity loomed before us, perched on the cliff's edge like some predatory bird. 7 years of visits, and I still felt like an intruder. "Ready?" Sabrina asked, not bothering to look at me. I nodded, though I was anything but. The moment I stepped out of our Honda Civic, practical, reliable, beneath contempt in this world, I could smell it. Sea salt mingled with disdain. The Ellington family legacy of old money and older prejudices. A fortress of tradition built to keep people like me firmly in our place. Preston appeared at the top of the steps, tumbler of whiskey already in hand at 4 in the afternoon. His smile never reached his eyes as he descended. Designer loafers barely making a sound on the marble steps. Parking the help's car. Daniel. His gaze fixed on our mid-range sedan with theatrical distaste. "Good to see you too, Preston," I said, keeping my voice level. I'd learned years ago that showing any reaction was exactly what he wanted. He clapped my shoulder too hard, his tailored Italian suit jacket hanging perfectly despite the casual stance. The country club ease of a man who's never worried about a bill in his life. His eyes swept dismissively over my khakis and button-down clothes I'd carefully selected to be inoffensive. "Still coding away? Or have you managed to boss around some unwashed programmers yet?" He chuckled, taking another sip of his whiskey. "Some of us actually create things instead of just moving money around," I replied with a tight smile. Sabrina laughed nervously beside me, squeezing my arm in warning. "Don't make a scene," she whispered, her smile never faltering. Preston's expression hardened for just a moment, before Margaret Ellington emerged from the house. My mother-in-law descended like aging royalty, her silver hair perfectly coiffed face stretched into what passed for a smile in this family. She nodded at me, the bare minimum social obligation fulfilled. "Daniel." She said my name sounding foreign on her tongue. "Still in technology, are you?" The way she said technology made it sound like I fixed toilets for a living. "Yes, ma'am, still keeping your lights on every month," I replied pleasantly, while thinking about the 7-figure contract I'd just closed that none of them would ever know about. Inside the house felt cold, despite the roaring fireplace. The staff, or the help, as Preston called them, moved like well-paid ghosts, appearing only when needed, then dissolving back into the shadows. Generations of Ellingtons stared down from oil paintings along the grand staircase, their eyes seeming to track my every movement, broadcasting their collective judgment. Outsider, every detail of the house screamed fabricated tradition, the family heirlooms purchased at auction, the library of leather-bound books that had never been read. It was a temple to wealth where humans were secondary. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated ritual of hierarchy, Margaret at the head of the table. Sabrina positioned strategically in the middle among cousins, while I was relegated to the far end, beside some distant relation who kept asking if I could fix his internet. Preston dominated the conversation with tales of financial conquests, each anecdote laced with barbs aimed in my direction. His cousin Everett joined in, discussing tax loopholes as though they were an Olympic sport. "The trick is knowing which shell companies to rotate the assets through," he explained to knowing nods around the table. I raised my glass during a brief lull. "To family," I said simply. The table fell silent for several uncomfortable seconds before Preston smirked. "Some people have to justify their presence at this table?" Sabrina didn't even look up, just stared into her wine glass. That silence cut deeper than any of Preston's comments. The conversation eventually turned to Richard Caldwell, Preston's business idol and CEO of the investment firm where Sabrina worked. Preston was effusive. "Richard knows how to spot talent," he said, eyes sliding to Sabrina. "Especially female talent, and he knows how to appreciate it after hours, if you know what I mean." I noticed the flush spreading across Sabrina's neck as she took a too large sip of wine. "Speaking of after hours," I said casually, "you've been working late a lot recently, haven't you, honey?" The Maxwell merger, she replied quickly. Too quickly. You know how it is? I did know how it was, or at least I was beginning to put the pieces together. When dinner finally mercifully ended, Sabrina adjusted my collar as we stood to leave the dining room. Her hand squeezed mine under the table, but not from affection. Tomorrow, she whispered. You need to apologize to Mother and Preston. Don't ruin this. I looked at her. Really. Looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't feel disappointment. I felt cold calculation taking root. As we walked out, I glanced up at the Ellington family portrait one last time. They had no idea I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. And Sabrina, she'd chosen her side. I smiled. Then a smile none of them would have recognized. The smile of a man who'd finally seen things clearly. I sat on the edge of the bed watching Sabrina remove her jewelry in front of the mirror. Pearl earrings first, then the diamond tennis bracelet, a gift from her mother last Christmas. Her movements were methodical, unbothered, as if the dinner had been nothing but a normal family gathering. Am I your husband? I finally said, my voice low but steady. Or just a clown for your family's entertainment. She turned, arms crossing defensively over her silk nightgown. You're always so sensitive, she replied, her tone dismissive. You know how they are. That's not an answer. Sabrina, what do you want me to say? That Preston is an ass, that my mother is judgmental? We've had this conversation 100 times. Her voice remained controlled, practiced, like she was handling a difficult client. I kept my own emotions in check, watching her face for tells. 7 years, and you've never once stood up for me. Not once. Because it would make things worse? She snapped, mask slipping slightly. You need to learn how to handle them. Handle them. I let out a humorless laugh. By sitting there while they treat me like something stuck to the bottom of their shoes. She sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You need to behave appropriately tomorrow. Apologize to Mother and Preston for making dinner uncomfortable. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. You can't be serious. I am absolutely serious. Her voice hardened. Either apologize or we're leaving first thing in the morning. I stood up, slowly, walked over until I was close enough to smell her expensive perfume, the one Preston had complimented at dinner. I leaned in, lips nearly touching her ear. I will be leaving, I whispered, but not the way you think. She flinched almost imperceptibly before composing herself. Whatever you say, she muttered, turning back to the mirror. Sleep never came that night. I sat by the window in the guest room, watching moonlight ripple across the ocean. The vastness of it felt like freedom, something I hadn't truly felt in years. The gilded cage of my marriage suddenly seemed so obvious. How had I not seen it clearly before I booked a one-way ticket to Oregon on my phone, a small coastal town called Cliff Haven, the earliest flight possible? As I stood to grab my charger from the nightstand, Sabrina's phone screen lit up where it was plugged in, a notification I wasn't meant to see. Richard, don't forget Friday evening at Winter Garden. My face remained expressionless, but beneath the surface a tidal wave was building. I returned to the window seat, opened my laptop, and began accessing the old backup files I'd set up on Sabrina's devices years ago when I'd helped secure her digital life. She'd never been particularly tech-savvy, something the Ellingtons considered charming in a woman. What I found was anything but charming. Encrypted emails, calendar appointments that didn't match the stories she'd told me about late nights at the office, and an entire folder of images hidden in a subfolder labeled Work Documents. I didn't need to see everything now. I just needed to know I had access to the truth. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Before dawn broke, I packed my essentials into one suitcase. My wedding ring made a soft clink as I placed it on her vanity, a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on far too long. I drove away from the Ellington estate without using GPS, without calling anyone. The weight I'd carried for years seemed to lift with each mile marker. What I felt wasn't grief or even anger anymore. It was cold, clear focus. For the first time in our relationship, I held all the cards. As the sun rose over the highway toward the airport, I thought about Sabrina waking up to find me gone. She'd think she'd won, that her ultimatum had put me in my place. She had no idea that from this moment forward, I would be the nightmare she couldn't escape. I pulled over at a rest stop, took out my phone, and created a new folder. Winter Garden. The beginning. Cliff Haven, Oregon greeted me with a persistent drizzle and the constant rhythm of waves crashing against rocky shores. Population 976. Perfect for disappearing. The studio apartment I rented sat above a bait shop with peeling paint and a persistent scent of mildew that no amount of cleaning could erase. But the wide window facing the Pacific offered an expanse of blue-gray water that stretched to infinity. When the storms rolled in, the waves would explode against the cliffs in magnificent displays of raw power. There was something honest about their violence that I found comforting. My first week was dedicated to vanishing completely. New phone with a prepaid SIM, social media accounts deleted, not just deactivated. I transferred every penny from our joint accounts to a new bank before Sabrina could suspect anything was truly wrong. I even changed my email addresses and created new secure ones that couldn't be easily traced. I set up my workspace with ruthless efficiency, a used desk from a second-hand store, ergonomic chair, dual monitors. Remote IT consulting would keep me financially secure while maintaining my anonymity. No video calls, no personal connections. Just the digital exchange of problems solved for money deposited. On my third day, I visited the local animal shelter and came home with Bite, a gray mixed breed with watchful eyes and the same wary gait I'd found myself adopting. He took to the apartment, immediately claiming a spot by the window where he could survey his new domain. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me with a look that seemed to say, "I know what it's like to be abandoned too." With my new life established, I turned my attention to the hard drive I'd brought with me. It contained years of automated backups from Sabrina's devices, a security measure I'd implemented back when I still thought I was protecting her. Now those backups had become my arsenal. I began methodically combing through the files, tracking patterns and uncovering the depths of her betrayal. The Signal and Proton Mail messages between her and Richard were damning enough, filled with thinly veiled references to their hotel meetups and after-hours strategy sessions. But what truly shocked me was the Excel file hidden in a subfolder of her work documents, meticulously tracking consulting fees and performance bonuses that Richard had paid her outside of her normal compensation. There were selfies of Sabrina in luxury hotel rooms, champagne flute in hand, wedding ring, notably absent calendar entries marked as Chicago Conference that coincided perfectly with Richard's client meetings in Denver. But the most damning discovery came 3 nights into my digital excavation. An email thread between Sabrina and an anonymous account, Arl Investments Proton Mail, discussing how to clean certain transactions for Richard through what appeared to be a shell investment fund. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial fraud, securities violations, tax evasion. I leaned back in my chair, Bite stirring at my feet as if sensing the change in my posture. This wasn't just about a cheating wife and her condescending family anymore. This was leverage against an entire corrupt system. They thought I was nothing. I whispered to Bite, who tilted his head in response. Just the tech guy, the nobody who married up. I created a burner email account and selected one of the hotel selfies, Sabrina, in a hotel bathrobe, clearly post-shower. Raising a glass toward the camera, I sent it to her personal email with a simple message. Every secret has its price. She never replied, but within hours I noticed her changing passwords across multiple platforms, even contacting the IT department at her firm about security concerns. I smiled at the futility of her panic. Everything I needed was already in my possession. The calls and messages from our mutual friends began within days. Where was I? Was I okay? Sabrina was worried. The Ellingtons were asking questions. Preston's message came a week after my disappearance. You can't hide forever, Daniel. Be a man and face what you've done. What I'd done. The irony was almost laughable. I reached out to only one person from my past life. Nolan Graves, an old college friend who'd become a respected technology journalist. Our conversation was brief and carefully worded. I need to go dark for a while. I told him, if anyone asks, you haven't spoken to me in months. He finished, I get it. But Daniel, are you in trouble? Not the kind you're thinking of, I assured him. But I might need your help eventually. for the finale. Sounds ominous, he said, but agreed to maintain my confidence. 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, an email appeared from a name I recognized: Amanda Shore, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. "I've received an interesting tip about Richard Caldwell," she wrote. "If you have anything to add, I'm all ears." I stared at the screen, then at the Winter Garden folder filled with evidence I'd been meticulously organizing. My finger hovered over the most recently compiled file. "Well?" I whispered to the empty room. "I wonder who will speak first." I sat at my desk, the glow of 3 monitors casting harsh shadows across the studio. Bite dozed at my feet, occasionally twitching in his sleep. Outside rain pelted against the window, creating a soundtrack for what I was about to do. After a week of sifting through evidence, I had mapped out my strategy with surgical precision. 3 clear targets, each requiring their own unique approach. Richard Caldwell, the apex predator who thought himself untouchable. My goal: destroy his career, finances, and marriage in one devastating blow. Sabrina Ellington, my wife, who had traded our vows for career advancement and excitement. Her punishment: complete professional ruin and social exile from the elite circles she so desperately wanted to belong to, the Ellington family, who had treated me like dirt beneath their shoes for 7 years. Their future, a permanent stain on their precious legacy that no amount of money could erase. "It's not revenge," I whispered to Bite, who raised his head slightly. "It's justice." I spent 3 days preparing the documents, applying every cybersecurity skill I'd honed over my career. I scrubbed all metadata that could trace back to me, created perfect timelines of suspicious financial transactions, documented every code of conduct violation, and collected the most damning personal exchanges I created. 3 distinct dossiers, each tailored to its recipient and designed to trigger the exact reaction I needed. Nothing excessive. Nothing that could be dismissed as a vindictive ex-husband's ramblings. Just cold, hard facts presented with devastating clarity. The first strike went to human resources at Caldwell's firm. Subject line: Code of Conduct Violation. Confidential evidence attached. The email was clinical, emotionless, simply highlighting specific sections of the company policy that prohibited superiors from having relationships with subordinates, especially when compensation decisions were involved. Attached were redacted versions of their exchanges and financial records, showing irregular consulting fees paid to Sabrina outside normal channels. No commentary needed. The facts spoke for themselves. The second email went to Amanda Shore, providing additional evidence of how Richard had systematically promoted Sabrina in exchange for their arrangement, complete with timeline correlations between their hotel meetings and her rapid career advancement. I also included preliminary information about the Shell investment fund they'd been using, knowing Amanda would recognize its significance immediately. This appears to be part of a larger pattern. I wrote neutrally. The SEC might find the attached account transfers particularly interesting. Finding Elena Caldwell's personal email took more digging, but Richard had helpfully stored her contact information in emails to his assistant about anniversary gift deliveries. My message to her was the simplest of all: 2 attachments, and a subject line reading, "Better a harsh truth than a sweet lie." The first attachment: Sabrina in a hotel bathrobe, champagne glass raised in a toast to whoever was taking the picture. Richard, obviously, though his reflection wasn't visible. The second: a hotel bill from the Carroll room, 9:14 on a date when Richard had told his wife he was at a conference in Chicago. The room service charges for 2 people were highlighted. I set these 3 bombs to detonate simultaneously, then visited several anonymous financial whistleblower forums to plant seeds of verifiable rumors about Richard's creative accounting practices. I needed public speculation to be brewing when the story broke. As a final touch, I called Nolan. "I need you to keep your ears open about Richard Caldwell," I said when he answered. "The investment guy. Something finally catching up with him." Nolan asked journalist instincts immediately activated. Let's just say some interesting information might start circulating. If anyone contacts you looking for confirmation, I'll suggest they talk to Amanda Shore. He finished. She's been trying to get something solid on those finance bros for years. 2 days later, Richard vanished from social media. His company's website quietly removed his bio from their leadership page. No announcement, no explanation. the digital equivalent of trying to slip out the back door unnoticed. Sabrina was placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. Through my old network, I learned that office gossip had already labeled her the boss's mistress, and her carefully cultivated professional reputation was unraveling thread by thread. Amanda's message arrived that evening. SEC is taking notice. This is going to be big. I smiled, scratching bite behind the ears as I scrolled through the cascade of consequences already flowing from my carefully placed revelations. Then a notification popped up from an email address I recognized immediately. Preston Ellington. I know it's you behind all this, Daniel. Don't think you're smarter than us. I laughed out loud, startling Bite from his nap. I typed a single response before burning the email account forever. I don't need to be smarter than you. I just need to know the truth, and you have no idea how many cards I still have left to play. The headlines broke on a Tuesday morning. Richard Caldwell steps down for personal reasons, read the business section with the smaller subtitle, Internal Investigation Ongoing. It was the corporate equivalent of watching a man being pushed from a building while everyone politely pretended he had jumped. I tracked the fallout with meticulous attention, sipping coffee as Bite watched me from his bed by the window. Within hours, financial blogs were speculating. By afternoon, Amanda Shore's first exposé dropped a scathing piece on abuse of power dynamics at Caldwell's firm. She never mentioned Sabrina by name, but the implication was clear enough for industry insiders to connect the dots. Online forums erupted with speculation, dubbing it the Winter Garden Scandal, after piecing together references to the executive meeting room where Richard had conducted his private sessions. The name spread like wildfire across finance and tech platforms, becoming shorthand for corporate corruption and sexual impropriety. 3 days later, Sabrina's law firm issued a terse statement announcing her indefinite suspension, pending an investigation into professional ethics violations. I had anticipated this move, but watching it unfold brought a strange emptiness rather than satisfaction. I wasn't celebrating her downfall. I was simply witnessing the natural consequences of her choices. Through carefully cultivated anonymous sources, I learned that major clients were quietly withdrawing from any cases Sabrina had been handling. Her carefully constructed professional reputation was dissolving like a sandcastle at high tide. Social media posts began appearing with thinly veiled references to her as the power behind the throne and sleeping her way to partnership. I documented each development with clinical detachment, ensuring that every avenue for career rehabilitation was systematically closed off. The law firm world was small and unforgiving of scandals. She would never practice at a prestigious firm again. The Ellingtons' response was as predictable as it was futile. Margaret called an emergency family meeting at the estate, attempting to contain the damage. But information doesn't respect old money or social hierarchies. Their attempts at damage control only highlighted their desperation. Preston took a different approach, spreading whispers through their social circle that I was some vindictive madman orchestrating a campaign against them. But no one wanted to publicly align with the Ellingtons. Now, not when financial regulators were circling and journalists were hungry for more scandal. My phone rang with an unknown number. One evening, I let it go to voicemail somehow, knowing who it would be. You have no idea who you're messing with. Daniel. Margaret's voice was icier than I'd ever heard it, yet underneath ran a current of panic I'd never detected before. I smiled to myself. You're the one who doesn't know who they're dealing with. Elena Caldwell proved to be the most devastating domino in Richard's downfall. She filed for divorce within a week of receiving my email, and her attorneys were systematically dismantling his financial life. I anonymously provided her legal team with additional documentation. They were missing evidence of offshore accounts and creative accounting that would ensure Richard faced not just social humiliation, but potentially criminal charges. Preston's threats escalated as his family's situation grew more desperate. His latest email abandoned all pretense of civility. We will find you, and this time it won't just be legal action. I responded by sending him a copy of a recording I'd discovered in Sabrina's backups. Preston boasting about routing family money through shell companies to avoid taxation. Along with it, I sent a simple message. Did you think I only had evidence about Sabrina and Richard? His response was silence. The most telling response of all, I didn't expect Sabrina to find me. Cliffhaven was deliberately off the grid, a town so small it barely registered on maps. Yet on a rainy Thursday afternoon, a rental car pulled up outside my building, and she emerged soaked by the time she reached the covered entrance. I watched from my window as she looked up at the building, her expression a mix of determination and defeat. She was thinner with dark circles under her eyes. Her designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. The polished lawyer was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I buzzed her in without speaking. When she knocked, Bite growled low in his throat. "It's okay." I told him, though, I wasn't sure if I was reassuring the dog or myself. She stood in the doorway, rain dripping from her hair. "You're a hard man to find." "That was the point," I said, not inviting her in. "I've lost everything." She said, her voice hollow. "My job. My reputation. Even my family is abandoning me. Preston is blaming everything on me to save himself." She looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Are you happy now?" I studied her face, the face I'd once loved. The face that had watched impassively while her family humiliated me for years. "Why are you here, Sabrina?" "Because I made a mistake," she whispered. "It was just a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. I still have feelings for you, Daniel. We could start over somewhere else." I listened silently until she finished, then spoke a single sentence. "I didn't take revenge on you, Sabrina. I just revealed who you really are." She left in the rain, shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her car disappear down the coastal road, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow, just the quiet certainty that justice had been served. As twilight settled over Cliffhaven, my phone lit up with a message from Nolan. "Ready for the finale. I just received an invitation to the Ellington Annual Gala." I looked at Bite, who tilted his head as if waiting for my decision. "Read them my farewell." I typed back. The Marlin Club sat perched on Long Island's North Shore like a crown jewel, the kind of place where even the doormen wore custom suits and recognized generations of members by name. It was here that the Ellingtons had hosted their annual gala for decades, a tradition that symbolized their unwavering position among the elite. I wasn't physically present, but through Nolan's detailed texts and discreet photos, I could visualize every painful moment of their downfall. They'd insisted on maintaining the gala, despite everything, a desperate attempt to prove they were still standing. "Sabrina just arrived," Nolan texted, alone, simple black dress, no wedding ring, no one's approached her yet. I pictured her standing awkwardly by the entrance, the pariah who once ruled these rooms with practiced charm. The woman who had looked straight through me at that dinner while her family cut me down. "Margaret and Preston are working the room like nothing's wrong," came the next update. "But everyone's whispering the energy is tense." I imagined Preston's too wide smile, Margaret's rigid posture, aristocrats rearranging deck chairs on their personal Titanic. The hushed conversations about Richard Caldwell's legal troubles and Sabrina's disgrace would be spreading through the crowd like poison. The texts continued streaming, in each one painting the scene of a social execution in progress. And then, "It's time." I knew what that meant. Nolan and I had planned this moment carefully, the final act that would ensure the Ellingtons could never resurrect their standing. 20 minutes later, a video arrived on my phone. Nolan, champagne glass in hand, standing to make what appeared to be an impromptu toast. His voice was clear, confident, the voice of a journalist who had found his perfect story. For those who don't know me, I'm Nolan Graves, with the Financial Chronicle. I've recently completed a series of articles exposing corruption in the investment sector, made possible rather unintentionally by certain members of the Ellington family. The camera panned to show the stunned faces of the guests, then focused on Sabrina, who had gone completely pale. Preston's expression hardened to granite. Margaret clutched her pearls as if they might protect her. "I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions to this important work." Nolan continued smoothly, "and especially to acknowledge the valuable silence of certain people in this room. It has spoken volumes." The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of silence that marks the boundary between a family's past and future. Then came the whispers, spreading outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Sabrina remained frozen in place. Preston stormed out through a side door. Margaret stood with her hand pressed to her mouth. Years of social training insufficient for this moment. Several guests made discreet exits, pulling out phones to call their drivers. No one wanted to be associated with what was clearly the end of the Ellingtons' social reign. Within hours, the video appeared on Reddit's Elite Exposed forum with the caption, "When traitors think they still have honor." It spread across social media platforms within minutes, becoming a symbol of elite hypocrisy and downfall. I watched it once from my studio, Byte curled at my feet, the blue glow of the screen reflecting my satisfied smile. I didn't save the video or share it further. The truth, once released, needed no shepherd. My phone vibrated with an unknown number. I silenced it without looking. Whoever it was, they no longer mattered. The final pieces of my chess game fell exactly as I'd anticipated. The SEC formally charged Richard Caldwell with securities fraud and insider trading. The penalties would strip him of most of his wealth, and he faced potential prison time. His reputation, the thing he valued most, was irreparably shattered. Sabrina's name appeared on the unofficial do not hire lists circulated among law firms and financial institutions. Her career was finished. No amount of family connections could salvage it now. Preston received a formal notice that his family investment fund was under investigation, triggered by the recording I'd strategically released. The Ellington fortune, built partially on tax evasion and money laundering, stood on the edge of collapse, and Margaret, the queen of her social circle, found herself uninvited from the charity boards and gala committees that had defined her existence. The ultimate social death. With my work complete, I closed the Winter Garden folder one final time and wiped my hard drives clean. No evidence remained of my methodical dismantling of their world. No trail led back to me. The mission was accomplished. Nolan's final email was brief. "They'll never recover from this. I owe you a whiskey." "I've already toasted to freedom," I replied. That evening, Byte and I walked along the Cliffhaven promontory. Strong ocean winds whipped around us, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. I stood watching the vast expanse of the Pacific, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of resentment had lifted, replaced not by vindictive pleasure, but by peace. I'd wanted justice, not endless vengeance. And now I could close this chapter completely. No apologies needed. No explanations required. No looking back. As Byte and I turned to head home, I thought to myself, I never needed to shout to be heard. I just needed to disappear after ensuring they would never forget me. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, erasing footprints in the sand, nature's way of saying that all things, even the deepest wounds and greatest triumphs, eventually wash away. But some lessons once learned remain forever.